Hi, Mairead. It's lovely to have a conversation with you. So we actually got to know each other around seven years ago in 2015, and yeah, there was realization for you then, and it's been quite a quite a ride, really. But the process of integration has been taking place, and it's nice to get the opportunity to speak with someone where there's been realization for quite a long time. So it would be really nice for you just to be able to discuss the realization, what led to it, and the integration since then.
Yeah, okay, David, thank you for giving me the chance to speak about this. I haven't spoken about it before openly, so it does feel like a space and a time to actually come forward and speak about it a little bit. We'll see how I do. I have no idea. I suppose the reason I can speak about it is I came to a place where I found it was quite irrelevant in a sense. There was no need to speak about it too much, and I was settling in and am settling in still to a very simple kind of easy life.
Yes.
But yeah, I saw some of your interviews and they definitely, I felt this intuitive kind of expression arise in terms of, wow, wouldn't it be actually maybe a really nice thing to come on and see how I can express the kind of sudden, for me, it was a very sudden opening.
Yes.
And I suppose as a result of like a prolonged period of a very intense period of infertility, actually, and the loss of I had 3 miscarriages. I went through multiple IVFs. I'm smiling about it because, you know, even as I speak about it now, the human part, because I'm very much, I really feel and sense my body quite fully, the human part, which I don't, I really allow that to be here. I'm quite happy being human and in a body and allowing these expressions arise. So there was a passion maybe that arose in terms of maybe coming out and speaking about it. Yeah. And actually it was this day, it was 2014 actually that this sudden kind of boom happened. It was an explosive thing for me. It's kind of amazing, really. I didn't plan it too much. Yeah, because how do you say that? Like, I know it was this time in 2014, but it feels totally unplanned that I'm actually sitting here talking about it with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I just happened to see some of your interviews, and I literally, that kind of initiated this passion or desire or sense of maybe coming forward and speaking about it. Yeah, and I guess as well, if it helps anybody else, if anyone else is going through infertility, not many people do come out to speak about it from the other side.
No.
Because I imagine it's quite a painful experience that people spend their entire life kind of integrating and working with. Yeah. So
I remember in one of the emails you mentioned that you felt quite a resonance with Una, who is a lady who appeared in a conversation, Dan and Una, and I did a conversation with Ian McNay for Conscious TV in about 2011. And yeah, Una being Irish as well. And you live near Cork, don't you? Cork is the most amazing location at the moment. There are so many people where there's realization coming forward. You know, some people I've had conversations with, others, they've emailed me to say that there has been realization, and you know, can they get into contact with you know, with people in the locality. So it's great that that community is emerging there, and I think if anybody wants realization, probably moving to Cork's probably quite a good idea.
interesting, isn't it? Tiny place. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I did say to you, you know, my memory is absolutely horrendous. I am very much absorbed in the present moment. The memory is kind of Yeah, and now that you say it, it's interesting because what happens, the process of memory is somebody says something to me, it surges up through my system, I remember, and then I go, wow, yeah, I'd completely forgotten about that. That's right, that's how I initially made contact with you, David. I remember yourself and Una speaking on Conscious TV. Yeah, it is interesting, this Cork thing. There's definitely something. I live in West Cork. I live close to a little place called Skull. I moved here because of the feeling of the landscape. It's extremely, I mean, it's incredible. It's so diverse. It's like you go for a walk and it's like you're walking in and out of these mini environments. The ecosystems like almost change with every 50. I mean, I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but that's how my system feels it. And I do know there's a huge influx of people here. It's quite an interesting community of artists, of, you know, people from all different backgrounds. A lot of healers down here and a lot of people working in different alternative practices. So yeah, there's something about Cork for sure. I feel like there's a heart center here. I think you can feel it. Yeah, there's a warmth. And there's some kind of an expression as well, you know. Yeah. So it's interesting you saying that. Sometimes when you're right in it, you don't see it from the outside so clearly. Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about the earlier part of your life and what led to realization
Yeah, I've been kind of thinking about this a little bit, but I couldn't come up with any plan or, you know, even in terms of structuring how to speak about this, you know. But I suppose I'd like to just relay, creativity, you know, that intuitive expression. I'm very sensory oriented, everything, you know, I kind of process through my body. I trained as a dance artist. I trained I think I was 19 years of age. I started very late, actually. Most people, I trained professionally. Most people start when they're like very young, 4 or 5. And, you know, now being on the other side of a very long period of, you know, quite a traumatic path, if you like, I really, really, I really see how dance has helped me to really maintain some kind of stability. Really stay in contact with my system and not bypass, because my God, did I want to bypass, particularly in the integration, period of integration. I've kind of been looking at a lot here. So I'm just going to start with dance and movement and somatic practice. So I continuously returned to that. I also started practicing yoga actually from a young age. I think I was about 16. It just happened spontaneously. I happened to be in a bookshop. The book, you know, the traditional story of the book popping out of the shelf. Unfortunately, that's exactly how it happened for me, you know. Well, unfortunately, in terms of it seems very stereotypical, but the book popped out of the shelf. I just saw all these amazing postures and I was very physically oriented. And I really loved animals and, you know, anything to do with the natural environment. So I started to practice yoga from about 16 years of age. So like those two things are real foundational principles that kept me very stable, very honest, very truthful, always in touch with that felt, you know, sense, which, you know, it's kind of amazing. It always kept me real. Dance keeps you real because you're looking at yourself in a mirror every day and you're facing your feelings. You lie on the floor first thing in the morning. I studied release contemporary dance technique and it's all floor based. And my whole inquiry through release work was finding my ground. You know, it was about the feet, my foot connection to the floor, this earthing quality, and then like what's beyond, what's underneath was always my inquiry as opposed to what's up above. It was like what's down below. So that inquiry kind of continued. It was a real existential inquiry. It's really like deep inquiry. I spent about 10 years working very rigorously in a dance studio on my own, kind of, like what is this existence all about? Time, space, rhythm, pulsation, all of these very kind of raw, fleshy inquiries, you know. And then Yeah, so unfortunately, what happened to me, unfortunately, at the same time, language is difficult. Um, I, yeah, I actually wanted to have children very suddenly in my life. I feel like my life was very full.
Yes.
I had a company, a dance company with my ex-partner, and we kind of traveled the world, and
Mhm.
we had a very adventurous life. And we also kind of managed to ground, we kind of did quite well financially. Somehow we managed to create 2 homes for ourselves, one in Dublin, and then we moved to Cork. So everything was very successful, and I did progressively go on to study a PhD in dance, and that happened just by accident. There was no
Yes.
plan, I promise you. I wasn't academically inclined at all. That just happened somehow. I got offered to do it actually, and I went to do it. And then I started to lecture in a university.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I was trying to have a child.
Mm.
I was going through multiple IVFs. I didn't make that decision lightly because I really did feel that the impact that had on my system,
Yes.
which was just, I can't explain it. I mean, you don't hear about IVFs and the process. Now, a lot of it is forgotten, believe it or not. It's kind of amazing that it is, but it really does require, like, you're injecting yourself every day. It's like a
Mm.
very artificial
Yes.
way of trying to do something that always felt like it should be so natural. It was just devastating, actually,
Mm.
going through the whole procedure. And as I say, I had multiple IVFs. There was a huge cost involved as
Yeah.
well. So there was kind of this building. I was told that I probably wouldn't be able to have a child naturally as well. The reason for going for this, I just thought I'd try everything.
Mhm.
And then, of course, I had 2 losses through IVF. Um, and then, of course, just when I had given up, and just when myself and my ex-husband decided, let's leave this go, we're fine as we are, we'll keep going, we'll get through it. What happened? I got pregnant naturally. So you hear this story quite a lot in the infertility, realm. So I got pregnant naturally. It was like, wow, it's like, oh my God, everything's happening. I had the job in university. I was writing my PhD. We had just bought a lovely new home. Yeah, it just felt like everything was perfect. We were also in the process of adoption. So we
Oh,
had
yes.
received our declaration, and we were hoping to adopt a child, a little girl from India. So there was a lot going on at that time. And it all felt, even though it was very difficult, there was like a pinnacle where it felt like everything is working out here.
Yes.
Everything, it's kind of all resolving, and there's going to be a happy ending.
Yes.
But of course, it didn't happen that way. And actually, I conceived on Christmas Day, which is interesting, in 2013.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so I had another miscarriage. It was early enough. It was maybe 2 months in. It's difficult for me to remember the details of it, David. But that was the end, actually. That was the breaking. There was a real breaking point there. And I don't think either of us recovered from that kind of high, that being catapulted into, wow, it's all working
Yes.
out now. We're going to have a child, and
Yes.
also we're going to adopt a child. They'll have each
Yes.
other, happy families.
Mm.
And then that loss was just absolutely, it was devastating, to be honest. And that's why I don't deny any of that. I've really listened to a lot of this extreme non-duality and the nothingness people, and I understand it deeply. I understand it. I think we have to push our boundaries and our limits. Well, I know I did. I had to really push through. It always felt like to me, to kind of realize that actually there's nothing to push through, right? There's the paradox, there's the great existential joke. But for me to deny the journey actually now would be an untruth in some sense, But anyway, so happy families, everything seemed like it was going well, and then the crash came. This time I was in a studio. I remember it very well. It was like I was in a studio and I was lying on the floor, and it's funny. I'm smiling again because I've heard this story before. I've heard this happens to people, and I can't take it quite seriously anymore, even though at that moment, oh my God, it was so real, the devastation, the pain. My body was trembling. I was lying on the ground. I had just come off the phone from my partner at the time. And I just could see, wow, this is it. It's over. And I knew it was over, that I wasn't going to have a child at that stage. I knew I couldn't sustain life. I knew I couldn't go back to my job. Everything was over. I could just feel it in my system. So I think I was probably crying profusely, and I was lying on the ground. I remember the physical shaking. And the devastation and the chronic pain. I like everywhere in my body was hurting. I was trying to create work. I was trying to write a PhD. It was a practice-based PhD. So I was in the studio to create work, to write about it. I couldn't do anything. So I had this moment where literally everything, it was like my whole nervous system just blasted open. And it was so physical because I was lying flat on the ground. It was like I was drawn up to standing. Wow. And it was like this force literally pulled me up off the ground. I was standing upright and I was just staring at myself in the mirror because I was in a dance studio. And it was kind of amazing. I was just looking right at myself in the mirror, and it was like I could look through the mirror. And I saw myself on so many different levels almost of existence. And I also, I just felt like something shooting up through my whole system, coming out the top of my head. And it was an up and out experience, to say the least. Big Kundalini experience. I went on to learn what that was. I had no idea anything like that could ever happen. I wasn't seeking, it was sudden. So I had that big up and out. Everything was light. I had light surrounding my whole system. I had a figure on my left. I don't know how long I was like that in that state. I have no idea. And then I remember kind of falling to the ground again and crying profusely because I just knew everything shifted and changed. It was like this huge memory of like, how could you forget this? It was like, how could you forget what you actually are? You're just this pure light, pure expression, pure creativity. And that's all there is, right? So that was the big up and out. And for weeks and months after that, all I could see was, when I was still working in a university, so I was going into lecture, I was going into, I was also doing a PhD. So I was like, listening to very kind of heady, very academic, very intellectual, pure, I was in that environment at the time. I was like looking at them all going, oh my God, if you just realized what I can see right now, because I could see like energy just pouring around everyone, just white. It was like translucent light, essentially. It was amazing. I guess they call that the ecstatic period, the honeymoon, the bliss. Yeah.
Yes.
Now there was a period before that. There's actually 3 stages to this awakening. The first stage was an initiation of the Kundalini experience. That was interesting. That happened 2 weeks prior to this, which I will say maybe was an awakening. It certainly was to a unity consciousness, maybe a heart opening. Like literally felt physically like my heart broke and it just boom, open to light, love, whatever, expansion. It was more of a spacious feeling. I do remember that. It's like my boundaries just went. Preceding that, 2 weeks before that, I had just met a complete stranger. I went to a workshop, a class he was facilitating. A friend brought me. I was devastated. I met this friend. It's so interesting how it happens, the kind of synchronicity. Who knows why it happens this way? But I guess that's creativity, isn't it? I met a friend that I hadn't seen in probably 10 years. And we were really close. And she's based in Cork. I had just moved back to Cork. we both trained together as dancers, so we were very close. We were always kind of seen as sisters, like we used to go out together and everyone used to think we were sisters for some reason. Anyway, I don't think I look remotely like her, but there was just an energy or something.
Sure.
So I met her and she said, right, okay, you're coming with me to a class. I've met this person. I can't describe exactly what the class is, but it's kind of meditation. And I said, look, okay, I'll come. I hadn't been out for years at this stage. I'd very much kind of secluded myself. I lived in the middle of nowhere with my ex-partner. So I went to this class and I met the person facilitating the class, who happened to be male. And the minute I looked at him, I was absolutely terrified. I just totally saw myself look back at me.
Wow.
So I can describe it. He was from Cork. He had the biggest Cork accent of a lifetime. I know I have an accent, but I think it's diluted because I have spent years kind of traveling and living in different places. And when you live in Dublin as well, you're just completely slagged for your accent. You learn to kind of restrain it a little bit. But anyway, I met him and totally Cork. It was kind of amazing. It was just like, all I can say is walking into the room, my body started to tremble. I was like, I wanted to run as fast as I possibly could in the opposite direction. But again, it was like this pull. It was energetic. It was like a pull into the room. I felt this, all I can remember is the sensory experience of like wading through some kind of a thick, fluid field of presence. I'd say presence now. I didn't have the term back then. I wouldn't have known what it was, but it was like wading through this thickness. And it was like, it was drawing me in, but there was like this huge existential fear as well, And I remember sitting up against the wall. I literally needed something against the back of my spine to help me feel solid. And he just looked at me, and I remember him coming over straight away and he just said, "Why are you here?" And I remember just sliding down the wall. It was literally felt like that. It was like I slid down the wall and I just lay down on the ground. And I could just feel this energy. I would say it came from my womb, actually, David, literally. And I felt this energy, and it just more and more. And there was pain, like it felt, I had suffered from quite chronic period pain my whole life as well. So it's good to talk about this. These are all sticky issues that people never speak about, right? Especially maybe coming from a Catholic background, you don't talk about these things. So I had very much suffered from chronic pain since 12, actually. Wow. Very first time, yeah. Now, it didn't last long. I'd either have it on the first or the third day, interestingly enough. So this is coming up. I'll speak about it because, every month, when I used to get my period, it was a very psychic time. So it literally, I didn't know this. I had no language for what was happening. I came from a very solid, kind of grounded, conventional family. So anytime I'd ever speak of such things, you'd just be like, no, Mairead, you're just being, you're being strange again. Can you just stop that and get on with it, right? Which I actually really appreciate now and deeply revere in some sense, because that kept me solid and grounded and it helped my stability with the integration. It's kind of a no-nonsense attitude, like, come on, get on with it.
It's nice to have that, isn't it, to refer to.
Yeah, 2 feet on the ground. Here we are, out you go, work away. There are lots of different things you can say about that, but there was something about that that kept me very real and very practical and very embodied. And I didn't have a capacity to bullshit, really, to be honest, which has got me into trouble as well. But anyway, so kept me grounded, but I did have these very big experiences of, now I realize past lives. This pain I was feeling, because I had no choice but to lie down. Essentially, I would be in bed for the entire day. It was very severe, I would just lie down And I had no choice but to let it happen, whatever was happening. And I remember having visuals. I remember leaving my system because the pain was too much. You're 12 years of age and you have this pain, and everyone's telling you what is wrong. You know, this is just a natural, normal thing. But like the pain was, I can't explain it. It was actually, now I realize as a mature adult, probably similar to labor pains, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, literally the contractions and even my expressions, the breath, you know, I had to breathe deeply. I used to shake, the blood used to drain from my system. Like, it was very severe. I would imagine, I haven't had a child, but I would imagine that's what it feels like.
Yes.
And I had these visuals of, in a previous life, literally passing away, you know, dying of childbirth, right? So whenever I did express that, I would just be told, dramatic, you're over the top, you're too intense, come on, be real, get on with it. Okay, so it's kind of those two very polarized things playing out over and over again. But I did have many out-of-body experiences where I literally was lying in the bed and I would leave my system. I wouldn't go too far, David, because I was too practical to go too far. And there was something in me that knew if you go too far, you're gone.
Yeah,
and actually you need to have your feet on the ground. Yeah. There's the practical part. So I'd be gone and I'd literally go to the ceiling and I'd look down at my body and I'd wait till the pain started to subside to a certain extent. And then I'd slowly come back in. And then I'd put that away because the next day I'd be fine again. And I never had a great memory, to be honest. And I'd be off again, you know, physically active, doing my thing. So I was very functional and very practical, but I've always had these kind of very strange. Yeah.
Well, actually, I remember in the TM community, there was quite a sort of focus on that period of time for the ladies, and it is actually a period of purification. I think there's a process where collective consciousness is actually being processed and purified during that period of time. But I think at the moment, because life's pretty out of balance, lots of women don't get the opportunity to do that. You know, they may be working or something, but really it is a very important time. I know, you know, in the meditation community, certainly for the first day, there was a recommendation that, you know, the ladies did nothing at all, because it was to do with just allowing the process. But but as you say, the sort of, there's a sort of practicality that's attached to that for most people, where you kind of overlook it, but it's a very subtle thing that's going on, and I think there'll be more awareness of that as people become more integrated, and because the intensity of it was telling you something's going on there, but you know, people say, oh, just get on with life, but it's you know, inwardly there was something totally different going on.
Absolutely, yeah. And Eckhart Tolle has written about this, hasn't he, in terms of the collective and the pain body.
Yes.
And I always had, like, the visions I had in terms of like the collective consciousness and the suffering and the woundedness and the pain that was radiating from my womb and literally going everywhere in my body. Like, I really had a deep understanding of what this was at the time, at 12 years of age. Like, how can you articulate what that is when you have, you know, when you're,
it's totally new to you, isn't it, really? And
and you've no idea, and it's very confusing then as well, and it's terrorizing, and, you know, panic, and you family looking at you in bed kind of like, you know, screaming with the pain, because it did get that back, like, that bad, that like I would have to sound to like release. Absolutely. So I had that for most of my life until I met this other person. And it was an instant healing, actually.
Great.
I'm just remembering that now as I speak about it, because it's irrelevant in a sense, you know, but it's not as well. But anyway, here's the confusion of that. I met this person. I could feel this womb, the pain. I could feel it. I thought, uh-oh, is this what's happening here? Is it my time of the month? But I knew it wasn't, because I felt that womb pain. It wasn't as bad as that pain, but it, you know, it was pretty bad. And then this energy started. It was like bubbling, like little ripples coming up, you know. I was like, wow, what is going on? I knew something really quite huge was happening. Now, of course, I did have flashes of that happen throughout my whole life as well.
Yes.
But I never knew what it was, you see.
Yeah.
When I was going through the pain of infertility, I used to drive on my way to university to teach in the mornings, and I used to have to drive past primary schools, and I used to see parents and children, and oh my God, by the time I'd get to work, my eyes were swollen, and I'd have to go in the bathroom and splash water and pretend nothing. You know, life really was about sucking it up for me and getting on with things, you know, and you know, kind of trying to integrate, or trying to regulate a very sensitive nervous system that was so wide open to everything, but kept it going and, you know, kept functioning. But yeah, and what used to happen was I used to drive home, and the pain used to get so bad in the car that I would stop at this grotto. Gosh, this is so Catholic now, but it's so true. I have to just be honest to my experience.
Yeah, certainly.
I used to stop at this grotto, and I used to just stare up at this image of Our Lady and say, if you have any compassion whatsoever, you would release me from this absolute turmoil. Like, the pain was just, I mean, it just radiated through my system.
So it was emotional and physical pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Psychosomatic, you know, it was in my body, it was in my psyche, it was everywhere. I even felt it as the collective. It spread it out, you know, as consciousness. It wasn't just in me, it was very much in me, but it was also outside of me, and that was the confusion. So like every day I'd look up and I'd just say, seriously, you're putting me through something here. I'm like, can you please? And of course, what does she symbolize? You know, there you go. You know, she symbolizes the exact felt sensation of everything I was going through. The land, the body, the space, the environment. So it's quite amazing. And I used to get this shuddering up through my spine, and I'd drive home the rest of the way and I'd feel it. It was like a rippling. It's like, wow, what is that? You know, but of course, now I realize it's like the little eruptions before the volcano, right? So yes, I met this person, and that was, if you like, I guess you could call that an initiation. And I continued actually to go to his classes, and he actually was an incredible support.
What sort of practice was it, Mairead?
Very difficult to describe, entirely unique. There was some meditation, there was breath work, there was inquiry. It was there was a potency, like the energy was just unbelievable. He was quite a young man. I didn't know. This is the funny thing about it. Like, I didn't even know he was a young man. I hardly saw him. That's what's weird about this, because I was so devastated at the time. I wasn't able to take in anything. Everything just was like, I hardly saw him. It's only like when I started to integrate things and would come back to him and look at him and go, you're way younger than me. How could you know all this stuff? He was a very young man who obviously had a very sudden awakening himself, and was from Cork and still lives in Cork. So, you know, I worked with him till maybe 2017 or 18. I had support from him. It was a very tumultuous support, David, because, I mean, you know, in a sense, I think he came into my life to show me every single trigger point that could possibly be triggered. And I literally, every time I met this complete stranger, it was like I would burn alive.
Wow.
I know. I wasn't so dramatic about it, but that's how it felt. And I literally used to look in the mirror, like, because I'd leave the class to go to the mirror, to go to the toilet, and then see myself in the mirror, and I would be bright red. I was burning alive. So I do feel like he really, really speeded up this kind of purification process. Anyway, I'm jumping now because I find it difficult to stay linear about all of these things. But he was a great support, and then you were a great support. I'm just going to land with that. Actually, interestingly enough, it's not linear, but it's jumping timelines in an interesting way. So that was my initiation. The pain was the kind of big awakening experience
Yes.
in the studio as I was trying to make work. And then what happened in 2015 is everything fell apart in terms of my ex-partner left. Very suddenly. Now, I did know things weren't going well, obviously. I did know this great kind of crack appeared in our relationship after the third loss. It was like we never came back together again. It literally felt like this great big, but it was quite sudden for me. I think because I was just dealing with so much at the time. It was the way I felt it and sensed it was that this person just left. And we had been together for 24 years. I'd met him when I was 19. So we had kind of grown up together and we had done everything together. So when he left, I collapsed, is the only way I can describe it. I rang my sister. And she came and picked me up off the ground. And I think she nursed me for, I actually don't know how long. It wasn't that long. It was probably a week or two I took to the bed in her house. And to be fair, a lot of wisdom came flowing through me the whole way through, because I knew something even more radical had happened. I was like, okay, so I had started to know I had opened in some way at this stage, right? That an opening had happened. People were calling it spiritual. I was always a little bit pushing against that term, because for me it felt very natural. But whatever was happening felt very organic. It felt very real. It didn't feel like some kind of an idea of something or some kind of text or a teaching. Maybe that was what my prior understanding of spirituality would have been, but this just felt really organic and real, and I had no words for it, and I didn't know what it was. My mind didn't. So anyway, whatever had happened with that collapse, it was just like the ground went, and I had no felt sense of my core.
Wow.
It was like this blowout, and it was like I was still alive, and there was utter confusion because it literally felt like I was walking around like a corpse. My sister came. Gosh, yeah, I mean, that was just amazing. She came and she kind of nursed me, and she was amazing because she didn't speak to me. It's exactly what I needed. I didn't want anyone to speak to me. I just needed silence.
Yeah.
She said something. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
She cared for you, did she? And
she just took me to her home, put me into bed, tried to feed me. I couldn't eat. So she actually just came into the bed with me and held me. And we hadn't done that in years. I mean, it's kind of amazing. We did that as young children growing up. We shared a bed. We were in a small enough house and we shared a bed. And here we were, big circle completing. And here she was, just holding me. And I think she was probably able to cry. I wasn't, because I do seem to remember her shedding tears. And all I could do was lie in stillness. All this energy soaring through my system, all this kind of wisdom. Some people call it downloads. I never get it this way. I get it like just cellular, just comes through my substance, my materiality. And like all this information, and all I could do was lie there in stillness. And this stillness came in, this profound stillness, and a blackness, and a feeling of like kind of suspended. So like a suspension. We get that in dance a lot, where you're kind of working with suspension and this feeling of it's not floating, because floating would be more of a dissociative state, which I have experienced, and this wasn't. This was suspension. It was very calming, peaceful. It was electric, but it was black. I've gone on to study craniosacral therapy. They call this maybe a dynamic stillness.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah. so this, I knew this was different. There was something about this that was really substantial, but not at the same time.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went to my doctor because I thought I had gone mad because my brain couldn't understand. And literally what happened, I realize now, is my brain stopped thinking. I didn't know that that happened.
Right.
They call this cessation, I think. So literally my brain wasn't really functioning. I felt like I was dead and alive. I started to think I must be having psychosis because my sister said to me, I don't think you're very well. I think you need to go to the doctor. So I did that. She gave me medication. She gave me some very strong Valium or something like that. I think I took it for about 2 days. She gave me a huge prescription, something like take 3 a day. I took a quarter of one tablet. And I was just like, oh, I knew. I was like, if I do this, I'm going to be numb, and whatever's going on is not going to integrate. The wisdom was there, like it was just kind of a knowing. So I just flushed it down the toilet, and I said, you know what? I've already died. You know, how? Let me die again and again and again. The experience of infertility I would describe as like a living death. And it's literally, you feel what the felt sense of death is in your body when you lose kind of what you've imagined, what you visualized. I even used to feel my child in my arms, like I had this aching from my heart out into my arms because I had this huge wanting to nurture another person, you know. So, yeah.
It's amazing the way your sister is so telepathically attuned to you. She seemed just to be able to read the situation completely and to be able to provide exactly what was needed at the time.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, that sister is very similar to my dad. And I know I am as well. And my dad was a very quiet man. Oh gosh, yeah, no, I adored it. Don't we all adore our dads, right? But my dad died quite suddenly. He died of a massive heart attack when it was actually 18 days after my 18th birthday. I kind of always remember that as a prolific thing, you know. And when my heart broke open and when this collapse happened, I remember, brings me to you, David, because I heard you speak on Conscious TV. And I could feel a presence come from you, and at the same time my heart was just, I can't explain it. It was like my heart was outside my body and it was making this, like, it was like an animal. It was like this massive pulsation, but it was like jumping from inside outside and into the space around me, and anxiety and overwhelm and all those lovely flavors that come from that whole heart space, everything, all the patterning, all the shields were broken open. So there was an amazing felt sense of the horizontal, right, the interconnectedness, but all my patterning at the same time. So that's confusing when that all happens in one go. It's like you can't pace it, you can't titrate it, it's called in craniosacral therapy. So 2015 this happened. I think I left my sister's house like maybe 2 weeks later. I said it was like energetics, that you need to get yourself back into your own home. You need to stay there and just see what happens. Just sit with yourself. All I wanted to do was sit in stillness. That's all I wanted, was to be completely alone. I couldn't bear to be around anyone. I just knew it would distract me. So I started to watch Conscious TV. I don't know how, I must have just come across it. It's amazing how things appear, right? I saw you on it. I felt a massive draw towards your stability, towards your openness. You spoke about being an artist. I just knew what you know, it's similar to when I met this person, went to the class. I just knew what you were saying was something I was. It was total truth. Everything. I think your practice at the time was called non-conceptual awareness. It probably still is. And everything you said, you were just articulating so clearly. I was like, oh my God, wow. So I contacted you and we started to have some conversations about that time in 2015. I think there were about 4 or 5 of them.
Yes.
And they were very substantial and they had an incredible calming impact, and the presence that came through and the clarity stayed with me for the whole 7 years of integration. I said this to you, there were 3 tiers to it actually. Let's see if I remember again. The one thing you said, the first thing was about, this is very simple. And you said to me, do you have a memory of being a child? The simplicity, the clarity, the easiness. And immediately I was a child. I just felt all those childlike qualities. And I was like, wow, okay, I do remember them. It's like literally you transmitted it because you said it to me, and everything in my system went back, and literally through the felt sense of being like a child just came into my system. And the second thing you said, and now you have the capacity, because I had explained to you what happened in the best possible way I could. And you said to me, the witnessing, that you're going to have space now, you're actually able to witness what it is that's actually happening to you. And you went through that with me. We spoke about my sensations and what was happening in my heart. And that was huge. I really understood the witnessing because I had done some of that practice in my movement and my dance. My supervisor for my PhD was quite an amazing woman. And she introduced me to this practice of witnessing as you're moving. Of course, there was a witness there back then, which is the false witness. But honestly, there was something about that definitely supported this other capacity to witness, which I felt as a spaciousness. I had all this space around this awful, the turmoil going on in my system. So the witnessing was the second thing. And the third thing you said, you spoke me through the immediacy of the moment of what awareness was. And I really started to feel the translucency, that lovely, maybe transcendent quality. All of the, and I always have the memory of the clock in my room just ticking. And, there was something about that kind of interesting, paradoxical thing of this machine, telling us the time and the sound of it, but it was ticking. And it was like I could feel it in my whole system. And I could see that, it just radiated a felt sense of presence through your voice. And that really stayed with me, those 3 aspects. So in moments of utter turmoil, I just feel if we're open, the exact right kind of support comes in.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that stayed with me, David. And as I said to you, I did want to contact you in between a few times. I just never, I couldn't, I made this pact with myself. I said, I'm never going to speak about this till I really feel clear about what it is I'm speaking about. Because I had a huge understanding of our capacity to kind of project and to, should I say, kind of like pollute our atmosphere with our own lenses of perception and our mind. And I just swore I don't want to do that. I never want to do that again, because I could see what I had done in my life. And that was really heartbreaking. That was like the grief that came up around that, this kind of pattern of self-rejection and hatred, and how I had projected that out into my environment. I just swore I never want to do that. So I'm not going to speak about something until I really feel like it's here and it's real, it's substantial, and it's not at the same time. So here's the full circle in a sense, right? Yeah.
That's amazing, really, that the integration of such intensity really for you. But you're in a great space now. Just it's taken a little while, but it's you just seem to have returned to just the reality of what you truly are. And we were talking earlier about creativity and the things which you're involved in now. So it's it's amazing the way the whole thing worked. But you kind of handled it all very intuitively, really. And Yeah, as you were saying, people just show up at the time you need them.
Really did show up. Yeah. I think there were 3 people in particular. There was the first initiation, let's say. Then there was you, David, and then there was a 3rd person that really helped me. I mean, I can't explain, through a practice called biodynamic craniosacral therapy. He just arrived. Now, I did go out to seek help because I realized when I was sitting on my own in my home that I couldn't feel my core. And I knew something had gone and had never returned, but I didn't, my mind was it was absence. I don't know how long I was like that. You know, I was very present. I remember I could just feel every step, like really could. But anyway, so this person came along. He was recommended. And listen, by divine timing, it was kind of amazing because he was a biodynamic craniosacral therapist, and he also was a diamond approach teacher. I don't know if you've heard of the diamond approach. Yeah, so he had both of those aspects. And I still attend this person, you know, because it's just amazing. He lives locally, and it's just the integration of the trauma. I don't think I could have managed it actually, except for this kind of continuity of somebody to be able to go to and bring my, you know, to help me integrate all that energy. You know, it's kind of amazing because I really do feel in a huge sense, I almost owe my life to this person without being overly dramatic. And without being hilariously paradoxical as well, because the realization is there wasn't a life there in the first place, right? But there was some kind of a process that happened through the subtle touch, very gentle hands-on touch that was incredibly grounding. And the cranial work really works with the structure and the tissue and the fluids. And that was how I needed to learn, you know? That was, now there was a self-inquiry as well, of course, that has to happen because the brain needs to clear as well, right? In order to discriminate, discern, you know, and clarity, alertness, all of those capacities. But the diamond approach teaching is quite incredible as well. And that together with the cranio, I was like, wow. And that has really, really helped me in the process of integration. I might just show you a couple of images because I'm aware of time as well, David. I don't want to keep going.
Well, we're fine for time.
Yeah, I think the images really reflect that cranio practice in terms of integration of extreme trauma. This is kind of an early day image of the initial kind of seeing. I don't know if you can see that. It's probably...
I can, yes.
Yeah, it's difficult. It is drawn quite, it's quite faded.
Quite subtle.
Yeah, it's quite subtle. That's like a clear seeing. This one was like a circuit break from a kind of habitual pattern.
Oh, yes.
Almost like something breaking from the nervous system or something cellular. You know, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it too much, but
I think what's really nice with you, Mairead, is the way you've processed it all intuitively and you've trusted your own inner knowing, really, and the people you've needed have shown up, but it's really been trusting your own inner guidance, and that's included people showing up at the right time and kind of supporting you, but you've not been, you know, you've not been kind of confused in terms of the way the integration has taken place. Whatever you've needed has sort of shown up at the right time, and it is different for everyone. So it's really nice to hear how those different parts of the process have worked for you, and it brought you to a great space, really.
Absolutely. And the cranial worked with the shock. So I had a lot of shock patterns in my system, all down my right side. The shock of my dad, literally I had embodied that shock. The shock of my partner, ex-partner leaving, the shock of the tree, my tree. So it's like, I just want to show some of, like shock patterns.
Wow,
yeah, and like, here's another one. These are coming from that integration process of the shock. Literally integrating into my system. This would be the right side, you know, all of those patterns were so apparent. And then my left side was wide open. My left side feels like it was just always entirely free, and that it needed to integrate into the right. This then would be like that unity feeling of balance coming in. You know, not that we're ever healed. That's another kind of illusion in a sense, David, but some kind of an alignment, because there's nothing to be healed, right? But some kind of an alignment definitely came into my nervous system where I could see through that, you know, that there's actually nobody to be healed and nothing to be healed. This one is quite nice because it's really around conception. I don't know, there's like...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing the way you visualize things and then you're able to communicate them in that way.
It's like, again, it's part of like the embodiment of the whole lot. It's like it just came through. There's just one more. Yeah, this one is definitely an up and out experience. Wholeness, and this is, you know, David Bohm. I don't know if you know his research into wholeness and implicate order. He's kind of an amazing physician that really inspired me writing my PhD. So it's like all of those aspects had to be ingrained, digested, metabolized, and then freedom could just express as it is in simple form. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
And how are things progressing currently in terms of the way your life's unfolding?
Well, I'm now training to become a biodynamic craniosacral therapist because I just think the work is incredible. I also I have a practice called attuning that I wrote as part of my PhD. It's hilarious because my PhD did a full circle. I started out with a particular question and then the whole thing just transformed as this whole opening happened in my system. So I came up with a practice I call attuning. It's a very simple open practice. It's literally like embodying a spaciousness.
Yes.
Where I'm just with another and whatever arises, you know, in that moment. And I've been facilitating attuning workshops now and again. You know, I really take my time with all of this. It's like I need to earn a living. But I also have found this kind of equilibrium. It feels like I can spend long times on my own, or long spaces and time on my own very happily. And then I'm very ready to go out and interact with people in my environment as well. So, yeah, and it's still unfolding, you know.
Yeah, it never stops unfolding.
Yeah, I managed to buy my own little house here in West Cork, and I'll tell you, the market went crazy after COVID. Prices just shot up, so I managed to buy a very simple house. And I'd love to build a studio in my garden and maybe facilitate some movement work or practice, in there as well. So we'll see how it goes.
It feels really relaxed with you, though, Mairead. It just the whole process, you know, even the way you've, you know, spoken about various experiences of trauma, but there's been a sort of underlying sense of ease and relaxation in the way you've processed it. I'm sure it didn't feel like that always, but it's, you know, where you are now just seems to be a great space.
Yeah. And I would really describe it as a cellular feeling, that it's almost like my own cells. This is a lovely quote from a woman called Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. Somehow hearing quotes from people really land it in your own system. It's like, you know, they transcribe something that you can just feel. But she mentions about, you know, cellular awareness, literally the cells of your body becoming aware. I guess it's the becoming aware of awareness, right? There's something about that that's just here permanently now. It's like, you know, people say it's an abidance, but it literally is this kind of translucency. It's kind of incredible, because I never thought it was going to be possible. No, I mean, the amount that I have had to go through, but I don't remember it very well, David. That's the beauty of it. I don't really remember.
It's so nice. It's
yeah. It's like water, isn't it? It's very fluid, and there's just some kind of a transparency and a real sense of ease and peace. That's the new part for me. I think I was always very creative and, you know, energetically inclined and good at making things and manifesting. But this other is like, oh my God, the peace is just, oh my God. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. It's been really nice to hear the integration process over quite a long time, and the way it's just stability has emerged from all the experiences you've had, and it just feels as though you're on solid ground. That the nice thing is getting through and getting to a point where there's just a feeling of stability. It just feels as though the foundation of your life is really solid now.
Yes, that's the paradox. Yeah, I was looking for that my whole life, that solidity, but now it's just here. Yeah, and it just is such a different feeling tone to it. It's quite amazing. Yeah, yeah. And I hope it's okay to do this. I'd love to read something just to finish, if that's all right, David.
Great.
Because it's something I wrote kind of back in 2015 when
Yes.
I was sitting, if you like, in the emptiness and that lovely quality of boundlessness, but at the same time integrating. And it also reflects my PhD supervisor. Her name is Mary. I won't say, but there's so many Marys in Ireland, it doesn't matter saying the name, because I haven't asked her permission to mention her. But she just brought something to me as well in terms of stability. I can't explain it. She supported me, and she really did see me through finishing that PhD. Yes. I graduated in 2016. I have no idea how I did that. But anyway, so I'm going to read this, and it's really kind of like as a dedication to her and her amazing practice as an artist and as an academic. So it's called The Artist. The fullness of nonconformity, wide open living, being beyond the constraints of concrete constructions, hardening tissue to bones. Linear pathways, iron edges sharpen establishment, cutting through the sensed, felt, unifying presence, softening cold logic, yet existing in sheer isolation through such simple misunderstandings. Inner richness of worlds revolving, resonating with no space and no time. Intuitive inquiry into invisible, unknown existences, undefined, only hinted upon, suggested, evoked as elusive tracings. Absorbent concoctions of emergent expressions, drawn together in fine, fragile filaments of balancing collapse. Courageous transmissions of absorbed connectivity, transmuting, catalyzing self and other as collective, racing through timeless utopias, creating present worlds of spinning threads, finely woven immersions of integrated precision, moments of completion in completeness, condemned into solid form. She feels yet remains unaffected. She senses yet is already destroyed. She moves equilibriums through collapsing form, atrocities expressed through her sensitive listening, harrowing sounds rattling through her quietly aloof allowing. She is me and I am inclusivity. I'm almost there. Electric impulses course through, nerve endings singe and fray, cellular synapse cutting edge, porosity of undeniable strength. Yet at the pinnacle of her inquiry, crafting clearly shocking obstructions that lay hovering at the very root of existence. Appearing only in her open capacity, becoming expression, recharging, a deep centrifugal force transmuting, swirling into abidance of her complete full self in the simple act of harnessing pure creativity as nothing.
So beautiful. It's amazing.
It felt a bit long.
That was great.
Yeah.
How long did it take to write? Because it's
just came out.
The whole thing just flowed.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at it in years. You actually triggered me to look at this again.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the best things, they just come from nowhere somehow, don't they? That's
yeah,
amazing.
totally. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Mairead. It's been really nice to reconnect and to get some insight into the depth of your experience. It's quite a story, really, but I'm sure people will be really inspired, because the the great thing is the intensity which you went through has been, it's a kind of, it's just a real blessing, which has helped in terms of the integration and in terms of just the whole of the processing, and it's nice for people to see that taking place, because sometimes when there's integration, people are wondering how long it's going to go on for. But it's great that you've undergone the whole process and you've come out the other side.
It's great to hear you say it as well, David, just to mirror it back to me. Yeah, yeah, no, it is great. And actually it did feel like a never-ending process, but yeah, no, it does. There's definitely another side. Yeah, yeah. And it's not to say life doesn't continue, right?
No,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
no.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
But
Anyway, thank you
yeah,
very much for the opportunity, David, to speak, and it's lovely to see you face to face.
thanks so much, Mairead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.